Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. And today with me is Christian. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, Christian?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm an architect. I am the president and one of the owners of a 100-plus-year-old architecture firm based out of New York City called Mancini Duffy. It was a firm that I worked at and then ultimately purchased from the previous partners. Went through an ownership transition, and that was about 10 years ago. And we've been growing and growing the firm ever since, and kind of changing the direction and trajectory of what it is that we do, what we want to do, things like that in the world of architecture.
Excellent. Now, one of the biggest questions in the world of architecture, which is very much touching on New York City, is the future of the office. With this return to the office, remote work, hybrid work, what are you seeing with your clients? What are your observations? What's going on there?
Yeah, so this is a fascinating subject. It is something that I think my perspective has changed a bit post-COVID, but not too drastically. And I think that for me, the takeaway is there's not one answer, right? And I know that's kind of lame, but it really very much depends on the company. And it also depends on the industry. I can tell you that for designers, architects, people in the creative arts, being physically together in an office is very beneficial. I think there's a lot to be said by that interactivity between departments and between design teams, and for us, technical teams with the design team, and just physically being together, just even be able to turn around at your desk and ask somebody a very quick question. It could even be a program question like, hey, how do I do this in this program? Right? Those are the kind of things that move things along faster, and people get less frustrated, or people have a better ability to think on their feet and design something, maybe move it a little bit further along than if they're just sort of sitting in their house working from home. So again, it depends on the type of industry. Collaboration is a word that's thrown around all the time, and it kind of annoys me. But those that actually do collaborate in an office, it makes a lot of sense. Not that you couldn't do it virtually. Now, there are other industries where I totally understand. The working from home is very productive. No need to commute. You don't really interact with your colleagues all that much. And so therefore, that working from home makes a lot of sense. I have more to say about that from a cultural point of view, but I'll leave it at that for right now. I would also say from the physical office itself, and this is where I've changed my opinion. I thought there would be a lot more companies bringing people back to work, and I can speak directly to New York City or the surrounding area. Our New Jersey offices are a bit different than New York City, but people don't want to come to New York City for work as much as they did before. Commuting is a pain. I mean, let's be honest, especially if you live in some of the outer suburbs. It's an hour commute. It's an hour out of your life. Some people it's comfortable. Other people it's on a bus. Other people it's on a boat. Other people it's on a subway. So it's not necessarily, some people drive. It's not necessarily the most productive use of your time. I would argue for me personally, that commute is actually good for me. It's downtime. I can decompress. I can be by myself. I can focus on emails. I could read a book. So there are benefits to it. But I get that that's not for everybody. But from a physical real estate side, you are seeing a bit of an issue in New York City. You're seeing very empty office buildings. Not all. There are some brand new office buildings that are full. We work on a lot of those kind of projects, and they're beautiful office space. They're innovative in terms of how they want to bring people back to the office in terms of the amenities that they've offered. But there's a lot that are going to get more and more empty as the future continues. And so what is the future for those? What is that financially for those people? What is the future for them in either will they default on their loans? Will they repurpose the building? Those are all big questions that I think we'll know the answers to in the next probably 3 to 5 years, because that's all beginning to happen. There's some rezoning going on in New York City. There's incentives that are being talked about. We look at with many of our clients for conversions. Can you convert an office building to residential? Some, absolutely, they'll work beautifully. Others, not at all. There's no way you can convert some of these office buildings to residential. They would just be completely impractical. So, again, it's a let's see what happens, and it all depends, but there is some positive outcomes to it, I think, in the end.
Interesting. So let's talk a little bit about the architects and where they work. And I do want to get to New York City and the commuting. I think the other thing about New York City and commuting that's relevant is the congestion charge that's going to be implemented or about to be implemented, something like what, $20 to get into the city. So that's an additional burden on commuting, right? So that's another thing to think about. But talking about architects, so I've worked with 25 companies to help them figure out their future work strategy. 2 of them were architecture firms. And what they found is that the things to do, they found a number of techniques for people to coordinate and collaborate when they're out of the office to communicate quickly. So one of them is called virtual co-working, where you get on a call with each other, video conference call, and then you just work on your individual tasks. But when you have a question, like you said, you could just quickly turn on your microphone, ask a question, and get it answered. So there are ways of addressing the kind of things that you noted. And what they found is that the best things to do in the office is for actual collaboration. Like when you're starting to launch a project, talking about the plan of the project or checking in on the project at various stages. But when you're doing your individual work, it's better for folks to work from home when they're doing designs, reports, even when they're working on their email, which they spend a lot of time doing. So there's a sort of a divide between individual work and, again, getting some questions answered through techniques like virtual co-working, and collaborative work, which is definitely better done in the office. And I'm curious about your perception. So this is, again, my experience working with a couple of architecture firms. What have you found about this question of individual work versus collaborative work in where it's best done?
Yeah, so we actually find, so our we have a policy, and I use that sort of very loosely because we are, for a 100-person architecture firm, we're very loose on our rules. And that's by design. We don't want to be too corporate. We want to make sure there's flexibility in what we do. But we do have our, let's call it a guideline, that we'd like to see everybody in the office 3 days a week. And we definitely want as many people in the office on the days that we have sort of our all hands-in meeting, hands-on meetings, which are, and we make them fun. But I will say that, the 3 days have worked out really well, because that's when we align meetings, we align team strategies, we do that work that has to be done as a team. When we're pinning designs up on a board and looking at them, stepping back, bringing others in, reviewing things technically. We try to do as much of that together, or even just management stuff. We do our management meetings all on Mondays, and that kind of, we have a very, very effective management meetings cadence where we kind of run through a bunch of things, and by 12:15 on Monday, everybody's done and off to the races, and kind of that corporate nonsense, even though it's important, is out of the way. But the other 2 days, what's interesting and what we found is that it really actually helps production and productivity. That to be, in a sense, left alone, and to be able to focus, we really call it sort of focus time. If you're home and you're on your project and you can sit down and you can actually work on that project and think about that project uninterrupted without someone coming to your desk and asking you a question or, interrupting you and saying, hey, we're all going to go out to lunch for the next hour and a half. You want to come? And of course you do, and it breaks your thought process. There's all that sort of thing. There is something, especially with architects and designers, we need production time. We need thinking time. We need time to sit down and concentrate. I always say to my wife, when I'm working on a design project, I'll say, I need to carve out some time this weekend and concentrate. And she'll say, okay, well, we have about a half hour or so between something, and I'll say, no, I need like 6 hours. I need to lock myself in a room and I need to think. So I actually find this new sort of hybrid work very productive for architects and designers, and I really do think it's here to stay. I've seen some companies sort of flirt with weird, you're in the office 5 days a week and then you're home for the next week and then you're back in the office. And I'm not sure what you're trying to achieve with the sort of, these other versions of hybrid. Maybe they'll turn out to be successful, maybe they won't. But I do find what we're doing with the 3 and the 2 very, very, anyone can commute in for 3 days, right? It's not that big a deal. Before you know it, it's over. And if you get those other days and you can, listen, I get it. You can, if you sit home and you're concentrating, you're working for 6 hours straight and you want to take the next couple hours and play with the dog and do your laundry and get the other stuff done and then go back to work later, great. I'm all for it. If you do your work and you're a high performer, I don't care when and how and what you do, just, enjoy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. That's kind of what I've been seeing with other architecture firms. I want to mention about the week on, week off. What I find there, so I've worked with a number of clients, usually not so architecture firms, but firms that work in other industries. So for example, accounting firms, they have more of a, let's say, end of quarter, and then they need to come in, do a lot of work, and that's much more collaborative. Whereas in the beginning of a quarter and kind of in the middle, there's less need to come in. So it's kind of more quarterly, and maybe they come in for the last 2 weeks of a quarter, 5 days a week, and the previous ones, they come in 1 day a week or something like that, maybe none. So that's an example. Maybe something also with sprints, when you have technology folks doing sprints, which is like a 2-week sprint or usually. So it's kind of, it depends on the industry and the kind of work they do. And
you're right. And that again goes back to, it depends, right? It depends on the market and the sector and the type of company that you are. And that's a good thing. And I can even relate that back to design. We used to, when we would go for an interview for an interior project, didn't matter if it was a bank or a technology company or a hospitality company, everyone wanted whatever the latest trend was, right? It was, and frankly, it was whatever, Google did. Everyone wanted Google's office. It didn't matter if you were a traditional bank or truly Google, you wanted Google's office. So, but now what's kind of nice is we go into these interviews and we show varieties of workspaces and we say, okay, well, how do you work? What is your plan? What do you want to get out of your office space? And it's no longer about the trend, which is kind of nice. You can actually focus on the individuals that make up the office and who's actually using it and why they're using it, and carve spaces out that work for them. I mean, we proposed an entire floor of all private offices for a company. That's so opposite of where we've been pre-pandemic, when everything was open floor plan. People, if they're going to come to the office, they want to be able to concentrate a little bit. They don't want to just be in a big bullpen and get annoyed by everybody around them at the time. So I think there's something exciting about sort of the future of the actual office space.
Now, and that's the kind of last point that I wanted to finish up with. So when you're thinking about the future of office space, we talked about how people are spending much more of their focused time at home. It's natural. I mean, certainly there's some people who would like to come to the office who have real difficulty with separating work from home. And there are some junior people who don't have a good home office space. but the large majority of people prefer to work in their focus time from their home office. And they're coming into the office, as you mentioned yourself, and I've seen in many other firms, just to do collaboration and to collaborate with others, either one-on-one, but most often in groups, maybe have all hands meeting, have some training sessions, mentoring. So that's what they're coming into the office for. So given that that seems like where things are heading, what are you seeing? What do you think will be the future of the interior space of the office, not the exterior space of the office? We talked about how definitely some of the older offices that aren't as nice will likely be converted to residential space because many people aren't coming to the office. But what will the office actually look like?
Yeah, so that what we're finding is that the office itself, physically, what it's looking like is that combination of private spaces where it is more office intensive, where before it was very open floor plan. Now we're seeing sort of back to the earlier times, let's call it the 80s, when there was a lot of private offices. And not private offices and cubicles, right? I mean, we don't want to make it a deadly space where there's no sunlight whatsoever. But this idea that there are spaces within the office that you can go and get some quality time, downtime, maybe shut the door, focus, or in fact, do Zoom meetings. I mean, a lot of meetings these days are Zoom meetings. I would say 90% of our project meetings are Zoom meetings. They're very effective. Sometimes I'm shocked where I thought, oh, we're not meeting on site today. Really? Okay, fine. We're going to do it Zoom. But what you find with that is that requires, if everybody's doing Zoom meetings, this idea of being, 3 feet apart from the next person and them being 3 feet apart from the next person and rows of people on Zoom calls with headphones, it's very distracting. It's very difficult to do. It's monotonous because you move from one Zoom meeting to the next Zoom meeting to the next Zoom meeting. So what we're seeing a lot is varieties of spaces. So more conference rooms, more Zoom rooms, more standing Zoom rooms. I mean, just to be able to get up out of your desk and then stand in a smaller room and do a Zoom call in a different configuration is kind of nice. And then you book a different room with a slightly different configuration and do your next Zoom call so that you're not standing there the whole day in the same position or sitting next to the other person on Zoom calls all day. Then there's also, I think, because companies do recognize that there's a cultural issue when not everybody's in the office, that you need to have spaces that are more all-encompassing for everybody. I know in our new office in particular, or actually all of our offices, we have gathering spaces where people eat lunch together. We really don't want you to eat lunch at your desk. We're not going to tell you don't eat lunch at your desk, but it's kind of nice to sit at a long table with your colleagues. We have televisions on, we have sports on, we have, whatever you want to watch. And it's a little bit of a decompression time. But that lunch area is then also a multi-purpose area for larger meetings or for all-in hands-in meetings where we're doing those once a month. We give, company announcements, and then we throw a big party. We invite clients, we invite consultants, people's, wives and children are invited if they want. And it helps create and foster a sense of community. And physical space can do that a lot. We also give awards out. We have an awards wall in that room. And so, and we give out silly awards, it can be, we saw you cleaning the bathroom when someone drops something, we give that kind of an award just to acknowledge that people go a little bit, over their daily duties. And then we have quiet areas. We have areas where we call it a library, where you can go in and sit and maybe take a personal call or just decompress for a little bit. And what we're seeing with some of our clients too is really trying to get those amenities organized. Some of the landlords want to provide amenities for the entire building. So they'll say, hey, we're going to build you some office space that has minimal amenities in it. It's more of a production space. and we're going to try and get everybody to come down to the, let's call it the second floor or the lobby. And we're going to have the most amazing amenities you can imagine. Everything from conferencing to game rooms to gyms to, yoga studios to recording studios to coffee shops that are manned with baristas and all those sort of things. Again, so getting people out of the office, off of those Zoom calls, down into the lower levels of the building, or maybe it's the upper levels if there's outdoor space, and utilizing that space and interacting with other people. That I think becomes important. So designing those spaces that can bridge both of those are really important. And I'll say this too. I do think community is important. I do think if you're working from home 5 days a week and you never physically leave your house and you never physically interact with other people, I don't know if that's necessarily a great thing. I know it's convenient. I know waking up and, popping open your laptop and working is really easy to do, but I'm not sure that's the best thing for you, especially if you've just graduated college and you're entering the workforce. That may sound like a real easy thing to do, but I know for me, my best times in my life were probably right when I graduated college and my first job and kind of going to New York City and being part of that. And, that was fun. It was less about work and more about having fun. And I worry that there's a whole generation that aren't going to experience that level of fun.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I think that junior people may not realize what they're missing.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Christian. This was very helpful, and I think the audience will find it very useful. Really appreciate you coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Then thanks to the audience for checking out another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to subscribe wherever you checked out the show and leave a review. It helps others discover the show, and it helps us improve the show. All right, everyone. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, and in the meantime, the wisest and most profitable decisions to you, my friends.